Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, we are going to take a look at Kaiju number 8, at some amazing science, how good Matsumoto is at weaving that science into his story, and how Matsumoto so perfectly blends that science with the world building and the story building that it is just chef's kiss. One of the things I've loved about this story from the beginning is just how grounded and realistic it is. And I mean, part of it's just the beautiful line art. I mean, it's just, the art is just amazing. That's what attracted me to it in the first place. But the science is what really keeps me coming back. Now, what am I talking about? All right, there will be spoilers here, soft spoilers for chapters 60 and 61. So you have been warned. To give you a chance to click away, I'll give you a chance to check out the links below the video. Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, my book of short stories of human absurdity. But in this chapters, we see the 4th Division way up in the mountains, far away from the city center. And they're about to take out this mole-type 67 kaiju. So we find out that this mole-type kaiju, pretty powerful Hanju with a bunch of little baby Yoju around it, bursts out of the ground about every 5 years. Now, and it's the 4th Division's duty to take care of it, and even though this is a fairly powerful Hanjo, the 4th Division captain is powerful enough to just step in and curb stomp it. Now, this is really good world building. It tells us that while the 1st Division is kind of the front line to take out the monsters that are attacking Tokyo Bay, the 3rd Division is more inland Tokyo. The things that it's more of a geographical definition with a slight overlap in geography that causes the competition between the 1st and the 3rd. The 4th Division is up in the passes, up in the mountains, to face those kaiju that burst out of the ground further away from the cities. Now, why is this such good science? Why did it fascinate me? Well, way back when I was just a little high school graduate preparing to go into college to get my biology degree, I went and visited my university. And I sat down and I heard an example lecture from the professor who would probably become one of my favorite professors of all time. Mark. Now, Mr. Mark, I sat there and listened as he told us a story. And he said that there was this place off in the world. They didn't have the best medical technology, and every so often the emergency rooms would get flooded with these terrible bouts of heart disease that did not follow any known pattern. Some of the people weren't eating healthy, but most of them were. It wasn't a rich country. They ate a really nutrient-dense, good diet. Why were all these cases of heart disease coming in? And the nurses who worked in began to notice a pattern. And they noticed that they came in seasonally, and they started charting it out, and the chart rose and fell like a sine wave. And the nurses are like, well, that's weird. People come in with heart disease, but there's a whole bunch of them at this time of year, but not a whole bunch of them at other times of years. And then someone else looked at that, and this person happened to be an ecologist, and they said, wait a minute, I don't know anything about heart disease. I don't know anything about treating heart disease or what causes it, he said as he munched away on his donut and coffee, but I do recognize that wave. That wave is a population graph. And the nurses go, but how could a population graph be causing heart disease? So they thought and they thought and they thought. And they took that population graph and they compared it to other known population graphs. And it matched up with the cox or kissing beetle. Now the kissing beetle, let's talk about this thing. It's a nasty little bug. Crawls into your house at night, bites you on the lip. And when you scratch your lip, you get its feces in the scratch. And this introduces a protein into your bloodstream. Now this protein happens to look a lot like the proteins on your heart. And when your immune system sees this bacterial and infested beetle feces in your bloodstream, it freaks out and starts attacking it like a good immune system is supposed to. And so it makes special antigens that go after that protein, and those antigens go after the proteins on your heart. So, but this cox beetle wasn't around all the time. It had a food source. So at times when their food source was scarce, the cox beetle was very, very low. in population. So there were only a few cases of this kissing beetle-induced heart disease. But as the cox beetle population rose up, the incidences of heart disease in the human population rose up. And my professor used this as an excellent example of cross-discipline integration, which is how important it is not to just be so focused on your own line of work that you lose sight of the larger scientific community. And the whole university was really big in that cross-communication. Collaborate or die. Publish or perish, collaborate or die was the motto we learned in that biochemistry department. So in this case, it was very real. So the nurses and the ecologists and the building contractors all collaborated, and they put up mosquito nettings and taught people how to avoid letting these beetles in their house. And they were able to bring down the instances of this heart disease that were caused by the cox beetle. Now, what does that have to do with this chapter? This chapter is reflecting the reality of the world that Matsumoto has created, that these kaiju are just a natural part of the reality. The mole kaiju are a natural occurrence. They burst out of the ground every 5 years, probably because they have a life cycle or a population. So they're more like locusts than like the cox beetle. They're doing their own thing underground. They burst out, they reproduce, they burst out of the ground. And the 4th division, their job appears to be to stay out of the major metropolitan areas, to go up into the mountains, up into these passes, and deal with this cyclic problem. Now, there are beetles. And instead of beetles, let's talk about the world's smallest beaver, which is also a host to the world's largest tick. These beavers only weigh about 4 pounds, but the ticks are like an inch long. Anyway, these beavers have population growth patterns as well, and they live up in the mountains. And they're land beavers, not water beavers, so they don't have the big tails. But they come out of their ground, and every 3 or 4 years they pose a threat to the new lumber, the new timber trees that are growing. And there are actually groups of people like the 4th division that has to go out and knock out these creatures every few years. Now the timber companies are finding better ways to interact with them, and so they don't have to protect their trees without killing these beavers. But that's a whole nother story. So the job of the 4th division is a very realistic job in the field that I've worked in for a decade now. There are creatures in the wild, beetles, the pine beetles that are menacing the pine trees, the mountain beavers that are menacing the lumber. There are and just in general, think of wildfires. We have cyclic systems of wildfires, times when there's a lot of them burning, times when there's not many burning things. The 4th division, as it's presented in this world, is not just perfectly integrated into this fictional world that Matsumoto has created, where you have the 1st and 3rd division vying for popularity, protecting Tokyo and the major cities. The 4th division fits into that little niche. It's up in the mountains. It's protecting the passes, keeping the lines of communication open, keeping the supply chains open, and taking out these kaiju before they can get into cities, like our wildland firefighter crews do in real life. They're out there in the mountains stopping the fires before it can get down and start menacing the population. And I just love this dedication to detail and the pure, beautiful consistency of this world Matsumoto has created. There is a concept in fiction that says this: for your fantasy story, for your sci-fi story, you are allowed to take one giant leap away from reality, and you can take that leap as far as you like. But once you do that, you have to stay consistent with the rules you've created. For this fantasy story, that giant leap was that giant creatures can exist, which they can't obviously in our world, but in this fictional world they can. And Matsumoto has just gone out of his way fantastically to make sure that his Japanese Kaiju Defense Force fits realistically into this world, following all the rules of logic that stem from this one great leap away from reality. And I just love that. These mole kaiju, they come out every 5 years. They've got to be dealt with. They're a natural disaster, just like locusts, just like wildland fires, just like all of these other things that humans have to deal with on a regular basis. So I can look at that 4th Division up there in the mountains and say, you know what? I've been there. I've done that. I've dealt with those hot-headed fools who we drop out of airplanes. They're great guys. Wildland firefighters are fun, but you know, they can be a hazard to deal with on the job. And it just gives you such an empathy for these characters and just grounds you in this world and makes this world feel so real. And I just really appreciate the work Matsumoto puts into that. So leave your comments below. What did you think? What do you think of the science in Kaiju number 8? Hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers. Humans are weird. We took a vote, and humans are weird. I have the data. 2 books in a series of human absurdity. Go check out these short story collections. What will our little green friends think of us when we finally do make it to space? Find out the answer in 2 books of human absurdity. Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, and Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Google Play.